Welcome everyone. My name is Mayank Jain and I'm the Senior Product Manager for Microsoft Endpoint Manager. And I welcome you to this Ask the Expert session for Zero Trust, the road ahead. This is an amazing session following the DB169 that you might have seen already with Alex and Sinead, and I have them on with me right now. I'd like to introduce them here. So before we go ahead, we have a few logistics things that I wanted to quickly explain here so that we can have a great 30 minutes. So here are some of the not rules, but guidances on how to engage with experts. We have a bunch of really smart experts in the background waiting to answer your questions on chat. So feel free to use the chat to ask your questions and we'll answer them there. And then we will also be, you'll be able to upvote your favorite questions so that other people know that these questions are important. And then we will pick some of those questions and answer them on air with Alex and Sinead as well. So that way we can make the best use of time so that we can answer a lot of your questions on chat and then some of them on air. And then you will have access to all the resources once this session is over. We do ask you to abide by the Microsoft Code of Conduct. I'm sure you've seen this many times in this event if you've been in any of the other events, and I'm sure you will follow that. So thank you for your participation in our Code of Conduct. And now let me just show you the next screen about the etiquette, which is that this session is recorded. So your being here is you're acknowledging that it will be recorded. And please help our moderators with, try to avoid any spam or inappropriate comments in the chat. So with that, let me introduce you to our amazing speakers. So you can see them here, but I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Alex, would you like to go first?
Yeah, hello, my name is Alex Leonard. I'm the Director of Identity Security at Microsoft. So basically, if you have an account that gives you access to anything that Microsoft provides, whether that's an Xbox account or an Azure account or an Office 365. Our team is the team that tries to keep you from getting hacked. So that's who we are. And I'm one of the various spokespeople for Zero Trust at Microsoft.
Thank you, Alex. Sinead.
Hi, everybody. Very nice to have you here today. I'm Sinead O'Donovan. If you connect and use any of Microsoft's services, my team is responsible for the global Microsoft network, which is used by everybody from Office 365 to Xbox to Azure. And I specifically am responsible for the network security aspects and the delivery aspects of that network. And I'm very, very passionate about Zero Trust, and I'm looking forward to your questions today.
Thank you, Sinead. We are so happy to have both of you here. I know this has been a long event and a long night for us based here in the US, and we're really looking forward to some of your questions today. Okay, so I can see some of the questions have started rolling in already, and let's get right into it. So the first question we have here is, well, somebody's asking, what is keeping you up at night these days when you think about security? So Sinead, would you want to take this one up to start off?
Yeah, happy to. I would say there's kind of maybe three kind of key things that I worry about, despite us for many, many years talking about no implicit trust on the network and don't assume because your device or you're on a network that it's safe. I would say that continues to be a worry, and I think it's because customers just really struggle of how do they put security in place in a brownfield environment. So that's probably my first worry. The second one is around applications, especially web applications. I don't know if people know this, but more than half of the traffic that any web property now receives is from a bot, and they're trying to whether it's credential stuffing or credit. Or they're trying out different credit cards. So I really worry about sort of the rise of the rise of the bot age, and how so many attempts are being made on every part of your infrastructure to break in and to exfiltrate data. And then the other one I would say is I think it's more of a people worry. As people transition to the cloud, just knowing that there's new tools and abilities available for them to protect their environment. And so I worry about people thinking that, hey, I did things one way when I was on premises, and that's the way it always has to be. And sort of really just transitioning to the mindset that, hey, actually, as you embrace infrastructure as code and DevOps, there's a whole suite of new security techniques available to you to protect your resources. Alex, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think for me, the two main concerns I have are, one, making sure that our technology is accessible. And what I mean by that is, if we look at, for example, at the penetration of multi-factor auth, which is arguably the most important thing you can do for your security from the identity perspective, the penetration there is only about 14%. And so, what's the reason for that? Well, we need to provide better insights. It's important to help security professionals make the argument with their organizations about the essential nature of doing multi-factor authentication. But that's just one example of a place where, helping you to set up a secure security posture is really, really important work. And so I think, my biggest concern, frankly, is that there's a lot of great and simple guidance that's already present, and it's not well adopted. And so I think that helping people, get the basics right, and it's one of the reasons we've done things like the Zero Trust deployment guides. If you go to aka.ms/zero trust, somebody will put it in the chat, then you can see these deployment guides that we have for networking and for identity and for endpoints, and we're doing more. That'll kind of help you get that secure posture together. And then the other thing that I worry about is that the attackers do continuously advance what they're doing, and so it's important for us to pull together the different elements. If you look at a good attacker, they're not going to just attack the network or just attack identity, right? They attack across these pillars. And so it's important for us to also defend across these pillars. And so I'm excited about the work we're doing with, for example, Microsoft Defender, to kind of stitch together all the various security assets we have into a cohesive shield for you. But I think that those are the two things that I think about a lot, is just, how do we make the technology easier to deploy and get more of you, frankly, taking the core guidance that you'll find in things like SecureScore, and then how do we get better weaves between the pillars, like the work that Sinead's team and my team are starting to do together.
Thank you, Alex. That was awesome. So while we have you, maybe I will ask you the next question, which is, if a customer has not started using Azure for workloads or identities yet, how can they start on the Zero Trust journey on premises and be ready to do the Zero Trust in the cloud from the beginning of their onboarding to Azure?
So I have a lens on this, and I'm sure Sinead will have something to offer as well. For us, I think that there's an old expression that I like, which is that someone with one clock knows what time it is, but someone with two is never sure. And policy is kind of like that, right? Like the more different points of policy control you have, the harder it is to predict both your customer experience and to predict what your security exposure is. And so I think that working with an on-premises environment is great, and we think almost every customer is actually in a hybrid deployment, right? They've got some on-premises infrastructure and some cloud infrastructure. The key here is to the extent possible to have as few points of policy expression as possible. And the reason for that is, again, so that you can kind of have predictability there and make sure you understand what's going on. So things, and like, it can be an example in terms of like assume breach, where you want to have a lot of data that you're looking at. It's not great to be looking at, just the logs of identity and then just the logs of networking. Like ideally you pull things together in a seam, you start to study them together, right? And so if you're starting with an on-premises deployment, the question is, how are you going to evolve that into a cloud world, and how are you going to maintain a consistent plane of control as you go there? For many folks, it's a good place to start on the identity side, is to start by saying, take those on-premises apps, and if you can't do anything in the cloud yet, getting them to SAML, getting them to use like a federation provider so that they're easy to bind into your cloud identity provider later, that's a good place to start. And then I don't know if Sinead has some advice for how to start on premises to, with an eye towards moving to Azure networking.
Yeah, sure. Well, maybe I'll answer it in kind of two parts. One part is as customers are setting up their cloud infrastructure, I would really encourage them to be thoughtful about the approach that they're going to take to their network design and their infrastructure security setup in the cloud. Because everything in the cloud is all API driven, and everything is like, we use software defined networking controls. So it's very, very easy to automate your setup and to put a set of protections in place, which tend to be more difficult on premises. And so I would just ask everyone, hey, be thoughtful. Or like, what's your approach to subscriptions? What's your approach to how many VNets you're going to do? How are you going to lay down your virtual networks? Are you going to do a hub and spoke topology, or are you going to do a specific topology per developer team, or are you going to do it by application class based on the risk that you've given to those applications? So just being very, very thoughtful about your foundation. And then really, really critical is thinking about your ingress egress points. In a hybrid environment, your data centers, your on-premise data centers, and your on-premise networks are going to be connected to the cloud. And so you want to think about, well, what controls am I going to have around the routes that are shared, around how traffic moves, to how am I going to do different traffic inspections? And I would really encourage people to use the cloud native network security controls because they are auto-scalable, highly available, and sort of designed for that new sort of cloud mindset. And then on the internet points, you have to think about every public IP that you're having. Are you going to deploy? Are you going to turn on DDoS protection, which we recommend? And because we just see every public endpoint, it is an attack vector. And while the internet's an amazing place to connect, it's also a little bit of the wild west of what people try to do. And everyone is looking. All the attackers are looking for an open port. They're looking for a developer that made a mistake and didn't close down the app correctly. And so really look to to really have that mindset of any ingress egress point, you have put the right controls and protection, and you really embrace sort of the model of zero trust and least privilege access, and use a defense in depth approach.
Fantastic, Sinead. And while we are with you, we're going to stay with you because a question actually came in specifically for you. So the question is, we are using the traditional moat and castle approach to security, but we are starting to plan for zero trust. What is your recommendation for first steps or changing the culture?
Yeah, great. I think one thing I think we did a pretty nice job in the deployment guide is we sort of laid out kind of what we found organizations to be sort of in 3 steps in their maturity model. And so we sort of said, hey, there's a traditional mindset where this is a case where you have an open flat where once a user or a device or an app joins that network, there's implicit trust. There might be very little machine learning and AI threat protection in place, and there might be limited uses of encryption. Then we've sort of another step in the journey where we talk about, hey, they have actually put in more network segmentation, and then that we have a sort of fully mature model. So to this person who asked this question, I'd say, first of all, just assess where you are, and then make a thoughtful decision of what area are you going to improve first, and sort of look at zero trust as it's just a framework and a reference model. It's something you're aspiring, and you will always be aspiring to improve your assessment, and sort of just take a few things first and approach and doing that, and take a few and then be successful with that, and then extend further.
That makes sense. Okay. So let's see now. Let's keep going. We are getting a lot of questions. This is a nice busy session. So thank you for all your questions, folks. The next one's for. I'm wondering who is this for? Maybe Alex. You could start with this. The question is, as a newbie, we would like to understand the difference between Microsoft Azure ATP and Microsoft Defender ATP, and then which one to go for and why. So is this something you want to tackle, or Sinead?
Yeah, no, I'll tackle it. So I think at this point, it's actually, there's some branding changes that are going on around Defender XDR that were announced at Ignite, sort of renaming some of the things. But the two products you're talking about, Defender ATP and Azure ATP, are specifically, Defender ATP is endpoint protection. And so it's advanced threat protection for endpoints. So you can think about that as detecting malware and security issues on your endpoint. And then Azure ATP for users is really about detecting bad activity inside your domain. So basically, Azure ATP for your users, the sensors sit near your domain controllers, and they look for rogue activity, things like pass the hash activity, anomalous network access that are like network share access, other things like that that are happening around your domain controller that can be sensed based on monitoring domain traffic. So Defender ATP, which is now Defender for endpoint, right? That's about endpoint security. And then Azure ATP, which is now called Defender for identities, is about monitoring for domain controller traffic that indicates you have an on-premises identity breach.
Thank you for that reminder on the renaming. So I'm pretty excited about the rename. I think it really simplifies some of the terminology we use, and I think it's going to be exciting going forward. So next question, and so the question here is, so Sinead, maybe we go back to you. The question is, can Zero Trust model extend to all my users, from employees to partners to vendors, and then also all my devices, including printers and smart beds, maybe it says, and then conference rooms. So is there any recommendation on the approach?
Yeah, no, absolutely. We think of Zero, this is a really good general purpose framework. And it's not just, there's a lot of attention comes to the user access aspect and how you can do Zero Trust for user access, but it actually is applicable to devices. It's also applicable to services. So anytime you kind of even think about machine-to-machine communication, it's a really, really good model, because the framework is all about, least privilege access, using multiple signals to make decision on who's allowed to access, and then assume that a breach is possible. So really make sure that you've put right network segmentation in place so that you can detect that that you've been breached, and also that you don't allow lateral movement and threats. So it's fully applicable to all types of devices, and identity is a foundation here, a foundational control, and that's super important. And there's some really nice work, I think Alex can even speak to, about identity for, robots, or identity for services in the cloud. And so I will let Alex extend, like, how are we taking sort of identity as a sort of a key control mechanism for all of these different types of device types and machine types and services.
Yeah, so Sinead actually did a pretty nice job of capturing it. At Ignite, we're announcing, or we just recently announced the GA of the conditional access for all identities. So we have an external identities project that includes things like B2C and B2B, and conditional access is now applying to all those kinds of identities. In addition, we're doing a body of work right now, which is around looking at service principles and applying conditional access to that. Also applying all of our security detections and that sort of thing to all the robot and machine accounts and applications. In the talk that we just, that this ATE is about, Sinead did a really nice job of talking about the importance of extending the Zero Trust model out to all your infrastructure and to the various components that are in play. And so I think that just goes to that what she said in the talk.
Excellent. Okay, next question. I hope you guys are doing okay with all the questions. We have a flood of them today. So this one, Alex, we'll stick with you on this, which is, what is the one do and don't that you want to share from Microsoft's own Zero Trust journey? I know we've been through a lot together, so that would be an exciting one. Even I'd like to know.
Wow. So I think, well, okay. So I think the don't is, don't wait till you understand every single thing you're going to do to start. I think that being pragmatic and sort of diving in with large user populations, the easier spaces to solve is really valuable. So I'd say don't wait. Like, I think in the early days of our Zero Trust journey, we tried to think through everything up front and then, say, okay, we got to figure out how we're going to do this thing that's going to happen in a year before we can start. And as we got, the team quickly got to a much more practical stance and started moving forward and made huge progress. Like the internal IT department at Microsoft has done incredible things on their Zero Trust journey. And then I think the do is use like essentially organization studies. So the idea that you can take a population class in the organization and say, okay, how are we going to secure what's happening around this organization, around this particular asset class, and by looking at telemetry, right? So you do use all the data available for your next step. So basically, the model could be, I'm going to look at last month's traffic in this part of the organization to determine what normal looks like, and then I'm going to apply my policies. And what that allows you to do is to not disrupt the business so much that you get business pushback on your security journey, right? And it lets you make really meaningful strides forward in terms of your security posture as you do it, kind of ratcheting forward click by click. So I'd say, all of this says just don't try to do everything all at once. It's not a boil the ocean. It's step by step by step.
That makes sense. And I don't think these journeys ever end. So it's always evolving. It's always changing, and that's what keeps it exciting. Because the bad guys are as smart as we are, so we have to be smarter than them. Okay, Sinead, ready for your next question? So someone's asking, Microsoft has stated that they use split tunnel VPN as part of their remote work capabilities. So how do you monitor data that's going straight to the internet segment and not coming back to your on-prem tools for monitoring?
Great. Well, we're at Microsoft, we're a huge user of Office 365, as is, I think, many organizations around the world. And so one of the foundational principles of these SaaS services is that they come with the native security controls built in. And the service is also designed to be globally available, and a lot of work has been done to optimally make it reachable for users. And so it's really, the Microsoft promises that we're giving you the best user experience and all the security controls that you're using. And so that's sort of that's why at Microsoft we embrace the split tunnel model, is that we don't want there to be we don't want extra scrubbing services or extra firewalls inspecting this traffic, because it's already, we've got the right security controls in place. And in particular, we have a lot of controls if we detect that there is anything malicious attacking, like MCAS is one really good tool. We've got Azure ATP, or Defender for Users now. Also, so we've got these tools that are all there, that are there to protect your access. And then we also have that great user experience, and we have the fact that the Teams calls can work and you have good quality. And so it's about getting that sort of balance of, the right security and also the right user experience, is why we're embracing that direct access to our SaaS services. And that's why we embrace split tunneling at Microsoft.
Thank you, Sinead. So I'm seeing a lot of variations of this question. In fact, a lot of people have had this question now, and even previously when the playback was happening of your session itself. And maybe I'll start with you, Alex, and then we can go to you as well, Sinead, which is, what is the low-hanging fruit where we can start our Zero Trust journey, especially if we are already, we have a traditional network going on and we're not a greenfield, we can't start fresh. I've seen a lot of people ask this question. Do you have any quick tips before, in the last 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, I'll try to be terse, but I think that and I'll put it in the comments. We have a document which is security steps. We also have our zero trust deployment guide for identity that'll lay these things out. But I think that going back to the earlier theme, the very first thing you need to do is you need to be on a single control plane. And identity, what that means is that you want to get your identities collated, essentially. So for us, that means think about getting your users provisioned, automating that provisioning, making sure that when people leave the company or change roles, that's actually picked up. Strong auth is absolutely essential. Strong auth for your users, so doing MFA, and then single sign-on for the apps, right? If you don't have single sign-on for the apps, what it means is that every method of access is different, that every log of access is different, that the security models are different in every case, and almost certainly what you're doing by creating the complexity of multiple sign-ins and multiple accounts for multiple apps is you're ensuring that people are writing things down and sharing things, and it's like there's no winning. And so from an identity perspective, single sign-on is the essential first step, and then I would say strong authentication is incredibly important, and I'll put a few links in the chat to help with that, and I'll turn over to Sinead.
Yeah, great. I think the first thing I would sort of, and I've seen lots of organizations do this too, if they have a huge on-premise infrastructure, is first of all maybe think about network segmentation and think about whether you really want your users on the exact same network as your applications and all your IoT devices. And so it might be a very simple thing of, and this is a kind of a North Star that we're sort of sharing, is that in general, you want to be thinking about user to application should be in a state where it can use the internet as its connectivity mechanism. And if you have that sort of mindset, then you can lay down, then you put all the endpoint protection around the user and the device, and you know that the user is going to be on different types of networks, and you really are going to assume that there's no implicit protection necessarily because you're on a network. So I would say sort of start with that kind of mindset. But what are my segments? Obviously, in the cloud, you can get super rich on segments and embrace and automate all of that because everything's API driven, and you can make that even much stronger and deeper as you go to the cloud. The second thing that we're seeing customers do is really use a defense in depth approach. So Alex talked about the identity control plane, which I think is fantastic, but you really want to be then looking at, well, what additional layers can I do? So on the networking level, for example, when you look at your applications, we're sort of saying, hey, we want probably a lot of your app to app communication, like you've got the web app, it's talking to a database, or it's talking to a file server, or it's talking to another service. Try to use like private connectivity there. So you sort of form this really clear, like, internet, it's all public routing, it's all assume the worst and then put all the right protection in place. And then on the private side, use the tool of private connectivity. And we're seeing that in Azure with the kind of skyrocketing demand for private link with all of our PaaS services. So that would be the sort of second thing, would be like, hey, use private connectivity, and then use the cloud native network security controls as well to augment and protect all the ingress points that you have on your infrastructure. So that would be how it's sort of also, to layer in, is that, again, how do we give maximum amount of signal and context so that we make good decisions, and then we also want to prevent any types of breach and lateral movement that may occur.
Thank you so much, Sinead. Well, that time really went fast. In the last 60 seconds or so that we have remaining, I wanted to show you some of the resource pages that we have available for you. Feel free to follow us on MSFT Security, where you can get all the latest and the greatest. I wanted to see if I have another 30 seconds to acknowledge quickly the amazing experts that we have in the background as well. So they've been answering your questions on chat, apart from Alex and Sinead. So pardon me as I butcher their names because I have not met many of them personally myself, and I'm sure they would have loved to be with you in person as well. But thank you to Carmichael, to Grace, to Ian, Jan, Mark, Nupur, Raphael, Sander, and Abbas, who've been tapping away on the chat to help answer some of these questions. And thank you, Alex and Sinead, for your presence and participation today. Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much.